Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Stories. It is such a pleasure to have Lyssa Mandel with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be
It's
here.
been a really long time coming. There were several reschedulings due to cross-country road trips and illnesses and all sorts of fun stuff. So
2020.
2020, hashtag 2020, yes. So we're going to start, as we always do, with a blessing to sink into sacred space together. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, to take a beautiful deep breath in, to let it out. Let's do that one more time. And to bring into our hearts this knowing that we are a continuum of source energy, that everything is divine, and that we have this invitation in all moments to co-create with the divine and to bring meaning and spirit into everything that is unfolding. The beautiful stuff, the sticky stuff, especially the sticky stuff. And I offer a blessing for this conversation today, that it may be a sacred encounter between me and Lyssa, and that for all of you who are listening, that you will find your voice in this sacred story as well. So may it be.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. So usually I just go right into the guest introducing themselves, but I'm going to depart from course today.
Okay.
So Lyssa and I met in Joshua Tree on an amazing retreat that Kristen Henge led us in. Kira Paulson and I also met on that retreat. Kira's been a guest on Sacred Stories. And I remember the moment when I like really felt a sense of kinship with you. It was in the hot tub, as all. It was Saturday night. We had come back from dinner. We were sitting in the hot tub, and I said, like classic Jessica, right now is the time when Shabbat ends. Would anyone be interested in kind of doing a creative version of Havdalah, this ritual that ends Shabbat? And you shared that you were actually Jewish and had taught, religious school back in the day. And I just felt such a beautiful connection to you. And it's evolved and evolved. And, I was looking, Lyssa, at your website before this conversation, and you describe yourself as past imperfect, present intense, which I loved. And I just want to add also present, like really, really deep. You're such a beautiful, deep soul. Yeah. And I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So do you want to share a little bit about yourself for those listening, and then we'll dive in?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for that delightful introduction. And my inner child is jumping for joy because all she ever wanted was for other people to know how deep she was. I definitely feel like I was when I was a kid, I wasn't a kid. I was like a 65-year-old woman in a kid's body. And the older I get, the more childlike I become. Which includes like a past in like a religious institution, and now have sort of like broken free to find my own spirituality, which I still identify as Jewish, but I definitely practice less traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
How to introduce myself. So it's interesting because I was thinking about my website today and how my website introduces me as, an actor, a writer, a comedian, a storyteller. And those things are all true. But recently I was thinking about how I might want to redesign that website to somehow encompass a larger essence of who I am that doesn't fit in any one of those labels, any one of those boxes. And I don't know what it is yet. I don't know if it's like, professional or like empathy professional, or I just feel like I'm here to be of service through helping people feel and express their feelings across a variety of mediums.
Yeah, love that. who was it that said we contain multitudes? Was that Ram Dass? I should know this
Oh, I
attribution.
should know this too. Oh
Yeah,
no.
I was thinking about that as you were talking, like we all have so many beautiful sides to us. Um, yeah, yeah, I love it. All right, so we're going to start with a really deep and profound spiritual question. And this is on your website. You say that you have an abhorrence of frise,
Yes.
the green. And I would like to hear more about this abhorrence, and if there's anything you'd like to share about your relationship with frise. Lyssa.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love it. So frise, it's the kind of green that you find in your salad that sometimes might be a lighter green or like white almost, and it looks like little spiny tree branches. Like it's a lettuce that looks like it has like fingers, sort of. And I hate it because it gets stuck in your throat going down. Like it is not an easy eat. I don't think it contains any particularly nice flavor. Like arugula is a little bit peppery, or bib lettuce is a little sweet. So I just think it's filler. And I think it just comes from years of working in the service industry paired with being a comedian, where you're always kind of looking for things to kvetch about. And I included it because I think that putting forward my sense of humor is really important in
Oh,
anything
yeah,
I do.
it's
Yeah.
such a spiritual practice too. I also find that frise is rather three-dimensional. It can be kind of hard to like get into your mouth sometimes if you're trying
Yes.
to be in a delicate eating situation.
Well, generally speaking, if you're trying to eat delicately, if you're like at a business meeting or on a date or something, I just won't order a salad because it's
Yeah,
just too many moving parts.
yeah, a lot of landmines in there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm not a huge fan of arugula, so I'm coming out with this now. I know that it's very in style arugula right now.
Hot
But
take.
yeah, yeah. All right. So from one deep thought to another,
Yes.
I would love for you to just dive in and share your sacred story. You brought up so many beautiful things as we were kind of communicating before, but there's something about a cosmic serpent that I feel like wants to come through.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I feel like I didn't really tap into my own spirituality until my late 20s, I would say, which if you follow astrology, it's the time of your Saturn return. It
Yeah.
happens at 27 or 28 when Saturn returns to the same place in the sky where it was at the moment of your birth, and it usually entails some massive transformation. So for the 2 years of like 28 to 30, you go through some transformative tunnel and come out the other side, which I didn't understand was happening at the time, and afterward came to realize
Yeah.
I was definitely a different person. And what helped get me there was reading, and specifically this book, The Cosmic Serpent, which was recommended to me by my barista. And of course, always take recommendations from your barista. Um, he wrote it. I asked him for book recommendations. He wrote it on a piece of paper. I stuck it in my wallet. And when the time was right, I found the book.
Wow.
And it's a book about an anthropologist who goes to the Amazon to speak to the indigenous people and ask them how it is they know which plants provide which medicines and which plants are poisonous.
Mhm.
And he begins the book as a very left brain, rigorous academic, skeptic, atheist, scientist. And over the course of the book and his communication with the indigenous people, uh, of course, they tell him the plants tell us how to use us, and he's like, I don't understand,
Yeah.
and realizes that he can't understand just by intellectually talking about it. He needs to know experientially, which means ayahuasca ceremonies.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The Shipibo tribe in the Amazon,
Okay.
and so he did these ceremonies himself, and over the course of the book, this experiential like wonder about how there are all these synchronicities in many native cultures across the world that would never have known each other, and the serpent is an image that comes up in all of them,
Uh-huh.
uh, like a parallel evolution almost. And I just remember reading that book and having this insane aha moment when he talks about like not only the image of a serpent as like a sacred symbol,
Yeah.
um, but also two serpents entwined, mirroring what DNA looks like.
Yeah.
And when I started thinking about it that way, it made me understand the idea of the divine or some greater spirit as existing tiny, 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 tiny inside of my body, not just outside of me in this Old Testament, like angry old man in the sky who's judging me, but actually as what I like to call a benevolent parasite living inside of me and guiding me toward what is best for my higher self. And um, it was what I needed at the time because I was such a skeptic myself and was basically an existentialist, you know, as a teenager and in college.
Yeah.
Really struggled with depression and wondering what is the purpose of me being alive? What is the purpose of me hurting so much
Yeah.
unless there's some greater plan? And reading this book really cracked open my idea of why we are here on earth and how we don't there's so much we don't know, and it's existing on levels that are even imperceptible to us because they're so small. Does that make sense?
It does make sense so much. Yeah, I remember a really amazing conversation with someone on a distance bike ride. He was a scientist and he talked about the cilia in our ear, the really little cilia in our ear, as for him, that like a demonstration of God's existence,
Ah,
like, yeah, that all of these little miraculous things in our bodies, this benevolent parasite, or were for him a demonstration. So I'm curious to hear from you, like, how old were you when you read the book? 28?
yeah, I think I was 28, 27 or 28.
27, 28. Yeah. So as you were thinking about like what is the reason for this suffering or for why we're even here, do you remember like where your heart and your thoughts went with that, maybe even versus now, like the evolution or what you came to?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think that I needed tangible evidence that there was some larger intelligence that was taking care of things, uh, some larger intelligence than human beings, right? Because human beings are the blind leading the blind, and are if this was the highest form of intelligence that there is, this human body, uh, there was something sad about that to me because I
Yeah.
saw so much hate and so much like hurt and so much ignorance. And it was reading that book paired with actually going to Rob Bell's talk called Everything is Spiritual. He was
Yeah.
touring the country doing this talk,
I have
Everything is
been to it also. Yep.
Yeah.
To it also.
And
Yeah.
it's along the same lines, it's taking the ideas of like quantum physics and biology on the microscopic level and showing, yes, there actually is a precision to everything happening, everything going on with us, everything that makes us able to live and breathe and exist is very finely tuned. The amount of oxygen let into our cells, the temperature we keep our bodies, everything that's happening, and it almost it made my heart feel so relieved because it made me feel like, oh, somebody else is in charge.
Yeah.
Somebody who knows better than me is in charge and I am taken care of. And
Oh,
that was
yeah.
like huge. And I still, even now, so that was like, what, 10 years ago? Um, and it's been an evolution of learning more about that and learning about things that are inexplicable in our world. And just because they're inexplicable doesn't mean they're outright wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was that that's it was and continues to be like super comforting to me, like, okay, I can surrender and know that I won't just fall into chaos, that there's something, God or otherwise, that is
Yeah.
looking out for us and has it under control.
And I feel, yes, I love that. I love like we don't have to figure it all out. I love that. For me it almost feels like little magic sparks planted everywhere, and part of our job is to uncover them.
Yes, it's a treasure hunt.
Yeah, yeah. But also, like what I'm hearing as you're speaking is the like teeny microscopic level of divinity, and then also the really giant. Um, yeah. Oh, I love it. So talking about the divine is one of my most favorite things. And I was actually prepping a lesson plan for one of my bat mitzvah students. We're going to talk about God. And so I've been thinking about kind of all these different ways of connecting to the mystery, the idea of like this moral force within us, the idea of like the patterns in the world and scientific truths as evidence of the divine, the idea of connecting with like the best versions of ourselves. And then also for me, the Kabbalistic idea of Ein Sof, which means without end. So this is like if you think of the idea of I am a wave and the divine is the ocean, like it's all, there's no stopping and no starting, just this kind of constant breath of the universe almost.
Yeah.
And I feel a lot of those things in terms of what you're saying now too.
Yeah, I think that all of the there are so many ways that point to this truth, and for me, even though it was introduced to me in the terms of Judaism when I was younger, I needed a different way in, and I needed science to be the way in, which is so weird. I'm not a scientific person at
Yeah,
all, but
yeah.
I wear this ring on my right hand
Uh-huh.
that I had made for me that says "Show me,"
Yes.
based based on a Rob Bell sermon, actually,
Yeah.
on his podcast, when he talked about using "Show me" as a prayer. Like, we can demand evidence of the divine if that's what we need, and um, I needed uh, I needed evidence in a different way from what was just being told to me, like, and the pieces just kind of came together.
Yeah, I love that. Show Me is the best. I was actually listening to um, uh, Let's Play the Create podcast, which is
Mhm.
Kristen Hingy and Natalie Roy.
Mhm.
And I found them through Rob Bell. So it's all just this beautiful connected circle. They
You
were,
know, I introduced them to Rob.
no way, really?
Yes.
I love,
Yes.
okay, so for listeners who don't know who these people are, Rob Bell is, oh God, I don't even know how to describe him. He's been in my earbuds on so many hikes and bike rides and time. And I think the thing that I like appreciate about him the most is the way that he just blows up the paradigms for the assumptions about the way we think we're supposed to do things.
Yeah.
Rob has a podcast called the Robcast that's fantastic, and we'll link to it. So I was listening to Kristen and Natalie speak about times when we feel like we're trying to be shown something, but we can't tell what it is.
Mhm.
And I was in, I was in a space when my knickers were just in a knot. Like I felt like, I felt like um, life was not working the way that I wanted it to. And I knew that something wanted to shift, but I couldn't figure out like what exactly it was. So I'm on this bike ride and I'm screaming. I'm riding along kind of like a highway, like a protected highway, screaming at the top of my lungs, show me, like just trying to get into a space of listening to the universe and hearing what she wants to say. And I stopped for a little snack break. And this guy comes walking on the trail towards me in the opposite direction. And he's wearing a Bob Marley t-shirt. And the t-shirt says, "Everything is going to be all right." I saw this guy and I got so verklempt. I really like started to cry.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, I hear you. I hear you. Like, I may not be able to figure this out in this moment, but this sense of trust that it's going to unfold in perfect time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
Love
powerful.
I love that. And it really, it's so timely right now. And I feel like everybody, I mean, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but all of the people that I have spoken to during 2020, during this crazy pandemic quarantine time, it's about really sitting in the uncertainty with patience. And and even though I know that's what it's about, I still get impatient and I'm like, I want to know now. But we are shown exactly what crumbs we're supposed to be shown in the time, and that sitting with the uncertainty, sitting in that impatience is part of the experience of growing. And if you were just handed everything you want on a silver platter right now, you would have nothing to work for. You would have no process to move through, and then you might as well just like be at the end of your life. So sitting in the impatience is part of it.
Yeah, it's really friggin' hard. And it's also like, I think when we can, yeah, when we can surrender to it, it's just, it's glorious. I mean, even like the Torah, the Israelite story, like they never reach the promised land. Like it is a story of wandering. It's
Yeah,
such a metaphor for human life.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think I found for myself, like when I can bring spirit into the messy middle, um, like that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask, I want to ask where emotions come in for you in terms of connecting to the divine slash higher self or guides, and kind of how you, yeah, how you use your emotions to tap in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this a lot lately. I'm thinking about the body as a vessel for carrying us to enlightenment, as opposed to just like a sack of meat that we drag
Yep.
around.
Yep.
And I've always been a really emotional person, a very feely person. It didn't end for me after puberty. It softened a little bit,
Yeah.
thank God. But for 17 years, I was starting in college, I was on this antidepressant because that really helped me regulate. And I am about medication if it's right for you. I think it's really important. And over the course of this past year, I decided that I was going to wean off of it and just see what was underneath, because I'm a different person now from who I was 17 years ago. I've acquired many tools. I've had so much therapy. I want to know. And, as soon as I had it out of my system, even though I was down to such a tiny, tiny amount, like the feelings started flowing very, very much, and they were inconvenient, and they didn't work on a schedule, and I feel like I was really ready to receive them, and rather than just like write it off as being like, oh, well, that's just depression, stamp a label on it, take a pill, go on with my day. I was like, what happens if I sit with this and really ask, like, what is it? Like, what is the root of it? And so much, I think, of my growth has come from looking at the root of my feelings. And I realized, like, oh, well, this is sadness. Like, it's not just depression, it's sadness. And that sadness comes from something. And what does that sadness want me to know? What does it need from me? So some of the best guided meditations I've ever done are by Josh Corda, who Corda with a K. He runs a podcast lecture series called Dharma Punks NYC. That's PUNX. And every week he puts out a lecture that is like equal parts like Buddhist spirituality and Western psychology, and sort of talks about like the neuroscience behind human emotions and thought patterns. And it was through his meditations that I started to ask different parts of myself what they needed from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's what emotions are doing. I think that emotions aren't something to be like squashed or explained away. I think that they are messages to be listened to. And that's only my
Or
experience.
even to be in dialogue with, you know,
Exactly.
to be in,
Exactly.
yeah.
And because I was like, I realized that, you know, I was judging myself for being a very emotional person. Like, doesn't really fit in with the standard capitalist worker bee model.
Yeah.
You can't just like break down and cry for 3 hours in the middle of a Tuesday and still, be a good worker or whatever. But really acknowledging the schedule that my body works on, the schedule that my feelings work on might have nothing to do with the outside world. And that's actually okay. That's just how I am, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, especially recently, I've been thinking about the term gut instinct
Mm.
because, I've had some stuff in my life that's been like really anxiety inducing, and I would wake up in the morning and first thing that would happen, my stomach would just be
Yeah.
in knots.
Yeah.
Just, like it was like a hard, and I find it really useful actually when you have a feeling to really tap into where is that feeling in your body, and
Mhm.
does it look like something? Does it have a
Yeah.
color? Does it have a texture?
Yeah.
Um, before, as you're dialoguing with it. And I was like, oh, my stomach tied up in knots is not something that I just like push away and go on with my day.
Yeah.
It's telling me that something is not right.
Yeah.
Something is not aligned in my life.
Mhm.
So can I listen to it without letting it completely take over,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when we're able to listen to it, then it doesn't completely take over because it's being
Right,
given compassion.
right.
Um, do you feel comfortable sharing what the sadness wanted you to know?
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's gonna get a little woo. Is that okay?
Please get super woo. Yeah.
Because I've done so much therapy in my life that's all
Yeah.
been like classic psychoanalysis,
Yeah.
like getting to the root of things, cause and effect. This sadness has always felt like it didn't really have a root in this lifetime.
Mhm. Yep.
And
Yep.
um I so I was on my fire escape in Sunnyside, New York, when I had this moment, and I just kind of closed my eyes and just like stood there and felt it and had this sudden vision. And who knows if it's just my imagination, like, embodying a feeling, or if it's an actual past life memory.
Yeah.
But I had this vision of standing at the edge of a cliff and looking out over the water with like the moon in the distance and being overcome with sadness.
Mhm.
uh, like maybe it was a suicidal memory from a past life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
It could also be that my chemicals are by default like low serotonin and low dopamine, and there are things that I can do to help that. But like the reason why, so uh, trauma and the emotional trauma stays in the body intergenerationally for up to 14
Yeah.
generations. So if you had an ancestor who was enslaved, say, or who was, something horrible happened to them, or they were raped or beaten or whatever it was, if that is not processed, um, like consciously processed, it will remain throughout the family line for up to 14 generations. And so thinking about that also helped my sadness sort of soften a little bit, to be like, maybe this isn't all mine. Like maybe I came
Yeah.
here carrying something that belonged to somebody else,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so powerful. I've had actually a lot of sessions with intuitives where they've been helping me to see that stuff isn't mine and then giving me tools for ways to um, cut those cords. But I
Yeah.
think even just the knowing that something isn't ours can be really powerful. I really love, for those who are listening, Ainsley MacLeod has a lot of stuff around past lives. And yeah, so that's someone to kind of to follow. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, so I've had dreams about like being in the Holocaust, being chased by Nazis ever since I was like like 4, maybe, like
Wow.
really, really little, before I even knew about it.
Yeah.
And probably like 5 years ago, no, not even, a few years ago, I kind of put 2 and 2 together and I was like, this has got to be like a past life something, where I somehow lost my life in World War II. And just that like realization that um that was then and this is now has been really powerful.
Yeah, that's just the realization is a way of cutting the cord,
Yeah, yeah,
and freeing, like releasing you from something.
yeah. Wow. So, right. So, this sadness that you were feeling um, isn't a weight that you have to bear, or maybe bear it a little bit with a little bit of a lighter load, perhaps.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and I will own up to the fact that, for the first part of my life, I held on to sadness because it was a familiar feeling to me and made me feel, it was almost like an indignant feeling, like, oh,
Mhm.
because I was so lonely and
Yeah.
I knew that I was different, but
Yeah.
at least I had this feeling, this is my familiar, comfortable feeling, it belongs to me. But over the course of the past, 10 years or so, when I've just started to release stories from within this lifetime, stories of like, life is meant to be hard, it's meant to be suffering, it's meant to be hard work, and actually let myself move into a place of more joy, more playfulness and creativity,
Yeah.
there just wasn't as much of a reason to hold on to that sadness anymore.
Yeah. Gosh. And listen, when I think about you and you as an actor and the way you bring so much like joy and playfulness and creativity, to your craft, like that, whoo, that landed in my body, like I felt that. I felt that. Um, I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you kind of a hard question about emotions and like teasing apart um, when we feel like it's coming from um, a message that our intuition or higher self wants us to know versus when it's coming from um, ego, fear, something like that. So
Yeah.
I recently had, this is okay. I'm giving you a tough one, but I know you can handle it. So I was talking with a dear friend on the phone who's doing a lot of her own inner work vis-a-vis relationships, and especially around attachment styles and like the voices of fear that can come in when we're being triggered. And she said the following quote to me. She said, "Fear is a super strong emotion that can tell you lies." Fear
Mm.
is a super strong emotion that can tell you lies. And so I'm wondering like what you think about that quote vis-a-vis the truth that emotions want you to hear and how you discern between the two.
I mean, it's a great question, and I'm not totally sure I can answer it because honestly, one of the things that I say in stand up is that I don't know the difference between intuition and anxiety. How do you tell?
Yeah.
But I think that I think that thing that your friend said is really brilliant because, and I will go to like one of my favorite teachers, Eckhart Tolle, and especially A New Earth, but also The Power of Now. Just side by side, they're amazing, amazing texts. Um, Checking in with how you with being present right now. I think that fear is real in a moment that you are actually fighting for your physical survival. And any other time, it's anxiety, and that anxiety is covering up a deeper feeling,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
whether that is sadness or anger or just a hurt, some part of your wound.
Yeah.
So because if you get really present in your life, if you feel like, oh my god, I'm so scared, and you get present in your life and you're like, okay, am I in immediate physical danger right now? No.
Yeah.
Okay, like that will just dissipate a lot of it. So it's asking, like, if you're having anxiety, just really interrogating yourself, well, what's underneath that? Like, again, going to the root, like imagining yourself going to the soil of yourself and reaching down and finding the root of that. And I can almost guarantee you there's something deeper than anxiety.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing is that the like the true depth, the deep fears or pains that are kind of like universal human experiences that we all sift and sort through over the course of our lives in this earth school. Um, there are like a few tropes, and so often if we can identify, is it one of these, small handful, that can be helpful. Like I think about, feeling like you're too much, feeling like you're not enough, abandonment, stuff like there aren't too many. And so if you can kind of get to the core, you can get to the core a little bit faster, maybe, with a lot of compassion. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody has their emotional habits that they fall into. And so it's like, can you identify what yours are? Like, I've begun to realize what mine are. And like, one of the best parts about growing older has been being able to zoom out enough to see my patterns, to see my habits. Because, for instance, I used to be a person who was a hypochondriac, and or I would have psychosomatic symptoms that would crop up all over my body. For a while, I had headaches that were so bad, I was sure I had a brain tumor. And then, I went to a neurologist, and sure enough, it was just TMJ. It was headaches from TMJ.
Right.
And, at one point, I thought that I had like a lump in my neck that I was sure was cancer, or a tumor in my back. Like, and it would jump around my body. And every time, I would just get present with, I mean, obviously I would seek medical treatment and make sure, get a scan, make sure it was okay. And then in the event that it, of course, was, like, I began to distrust that anxiety voice that was telling me there was something physically wrong with me. And that was my own pattern. I'm not saying that's the same for everybody. And please, don't dismiss.
Yeah.
Please don't dismiss any medical concerns. However, for me, I was like, oh, this has happened enough times that I can like nip it in the bud.
Yes.
And so I would get a weird pain somewhere in my body and be like, okay, I know what you are. Also, great resource, two great resources if I can.
Yeah.
Anatomy of the Spirit is a book by Caroline Meese.
Yes.
And it goes through, all the chakras through the lens of like spirituality and physicality. She's a medical intuitive. And finds, usually an emotional or trauma-based root to any physical symptom in the body. And Eastern Body, Western Mind by Anodea Judith, which is similar thing, goes through all the chakras. And then, of course, Louise Hay,
Yes.
You Can Heal Your Life, has this glossary. And so now, whenever I feel some weird symptom, I'm like, I wonder what is the root of this symptom. And I will Google Louise Hay and whatever it is, if it's like toe or like, elbow, and she will list like the emotional root and like an affirmation for whatever that is. I've talked so long that I got away from whatever your original question was now.
No, you're great. You're great. We were talking about, fear versus other emotions, and kind of discerning when something is coming from fear versus when something is coming from a deep truth within.
Right.
But yeah. And it's interesting about physical symptoms. Like I got knocked on my tush for a month again with what we think was probably post-COVID stuff that many people are experiencing. And I really took some time to listen to like, what is this trying to tell me? And it was really about like doing less and having like staying true to what I really want and keeping things like radically simple, all of which is easier said than done when you're growing a business, but yeah, I think, we can look things up in the charts, and then we can also kind of tap into our own inner knowing, like what really wants to come through here. And I think something I'll say too, because we keep talking about timelines, and it feels important to bring up, and like the idea that we should be over something by now, or we should have figured something out, which to me is just like total BS and really heavy. But I find that two things. One is I'm continually surprised by how tender things still are. I went through a breakup and fairly recently, and it, and it was, even though it wasn't like a super long-term, super committed relationship, like still feeling continually surprised at, the tenderness of the feelings, and just feeling the sadness and being like, oh, let me give myself a little bit more time to actually like feel this and heal it. So that's one thing. And then the other two, and you had mentioned this before, is like that I'll notice sometimes like the same issue will come up. Maybe it's around like the pain of my parents' divorce, which happened when I was 20. So 21 years ago. And I'll be amazed that it's still like such a tender wound.
Yes.
But then I remind myself, like, this is like spiraling layers of the onion, like we approach it from new understandings and new depth. And the pain that I was feeling when I was 20 is very different than the pain that I'm feeling now. And so, yeah, it feels like a sacred spiral.
Yes, I love that.
Mhm.
I mean, I agree completely with the spiral. It's like how I think about getting older. It's not a chronological straight line from A to B. It's actually like climbing a mountain but circling around it. And when you get to certain points, you feel echoes of the you who you were at that same point in the mountain a little ways down. You know,
Yeah.
and I felt that so much this year as well when I had a breakup, or I guess I should call it a break, but at the time I didn't know. I thought it was a breakup. And um, not only was I experiencing the familiarity of feelings from the last time I had a major breakup or two times ago
Yeah.
and knowing what those were, it was like the music that I had been listening to at that time was
Mhm.
suddenly back in my head,
Oh,
and like
fascinating.
like the way that I was like journaling was the same. It was like I really was feeling this echo, and because it had happened before, it was, I'm not saying the sadness was any less sad, but it was easier for me to hold it because I've been through that before and I came out the other end.
Yes.
And it was during that break time that I tried IFS, which I wanted to talk about, which
Yeah,
is
please.
internal family systems, similar to what we were saying, only you have someone who is a therapist who is guiding you to go inward and to speak to different parts of yourself, to dialogue with different parts of yourself, to ask them what they need, if they look like something or feel like something, like what is that, to really visualize that. And for me it was like this part of myself, this wound that kind of got stuck when I was like 13 or 14,
Yep.
um, never had her needs met. And so she was rearing up as my 37-year-old self was like, what is happening right now? And so talking like it's earlier than you think. Like if you're experiencing prolonged sadness about this breakup, of course, because it's touching into earlier wounds. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned like your parents' divorce as well. You have wounds around relationship, what you think relationship is or should be, in quotes. Um, and so uh, it was just really profoundly helpful for me to to go back to a time when I thought I was done with, and be like, oh, there's still more healing to uncover back there that can help me now.
Yeah, I
You know,
love that. And I love that you mentioned IFS. I mean, I think what I found as I've gotten older is that like these things are always going to be a part of us. When Jacob wrestles with the angel in the Torah, like his hip is wrenched and he forever walks with a limp, like he has this profound encounter and he's always going to have this limp. But it's like the way that we relate to it over the years gets, it's not deeper. What is it? We relate to it in ways, with more and more wisdom, maybe. I think we're able to bring more and more wisdom to the wound. Yeah.
and grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking as you were talking about spirals, because I'm such a outdoor person, the idea of switchbacks came to me. Like when you're going up a mountain, you can't always go vertically because it's too steep. You need to like cut across it so that you can make your way up. And the spiral is kind of the same thing a
Right.
little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Um, I love it. Well, I want to like kind of switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the fun things that I'm doing with Sacred Stories, because we're doing a little bit of a longer format, is I'm getting to ask questions that are beyond just your sacred story. And I'm
Yeah.
always like really interested in craft And now I'm getting to talk to an amazing actor. I'm curious, like, if you were to think about a project that you've worked on that has touched your heart the most deeply, what is it, and how did it touch you?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, this doesn't sound like too self indulgent, but like I hosted and produced a podcast slash live talk show for 5 years
Yeah.
on both the East and West Coast called The Bitch Seat, which is a talk show about childhood, a comedy therapy talk show about childhood. And um, doing that was like extremely healing for me,
Mhm.
even though because it always began with it was the perfect encapsulation of I think why I'm here on earth, where it began with me like reading from journals from when I was a kid. So like getting to express my younger self in a way that she didn't get to have what really wanted and be
Yeah.
seen and
Yeah.
heard. And then inviting up guests to share something that they wrote or made when they were kids. So basically giving space for other people's inner children to come out and play in a public way that was like not shaming at all, super warm. And over the process of 5 years of doing this with like, hundreds of guests, um, uh, I felt like that I was like working through karma almost.
Oh,
And
yeah.
uh, it was so, I mean, I remember the very first time I did it, like I did it once as a solo show where I just had an hour on stage to just like read a bunch of journal entries, talk about stories from my childhood,
Yeah.
and with like music that I listened to back then. And I remember being on my way to the subway to go to the theater in New York where I was going to do it, and just feeling like so filled up with excitement and
Yeah.
like butterflies and those feelings that you have so much when you're a kid, but I feel like you have less of as an adult,
Yeah.
that anticipation and just knowing, just like almost vibrating, knowing that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing in that moment. And so more than a creative project, it was really an affirmation that I was on the right path, that I was living my purpose.
Oh, I love that. The words that are reverberating through my being are sacred reparenting. Like,
Yeah.
you are giving that to yourself. You are providing this space for others to do that. So
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah. And I just keep coming back to this idea of play. Um, I think for many of us who had experiences in childhood where we had to grow up too fast or take on responsibility earlier than we were ready for, um, or were didn't have the opportunity to play because we were struggling with sadness, any of those things, like, to be able to reclaim that is so profoundly healing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huge. Huge.
huge.
That's why I can't recommend improv enough. I don't care what line of work you are in. It is so amazing because you are forced to play in that moment, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I really find, when you think of like little kiddos whose connection to spirit is so profound, like they find wonder in everything. For me, um, sacred play has been such a portal to the divine. Like when I'm in like my goofiness and my joy um and just like it's exact like vibrating with giddiness, just as
Yeah.
you said, like, oh, I feel so tapped in. Yeah,
Yes.
feels really
Exactly.
good. Wow, I love that. I love that. um what's something you're really proud of in your life? Would you say something you're really proud of?
Uh, I mean, also probably pertaining to the bitch seat.
Yeah.
I remember feeling like, at the beginning of it, like I had to put my big girl pants on and write a press release and ask for people's connections to like people in the press, or to ask for people to connect me to people who were like comedians with names, or like all these things that felt very scary.
Yeah.
I did them anyway, and I did them myself, and that felt really profound, that it wasn't that because I think we have the misunderstanding as creatives, especially, that it's all about luck, that you're in the right place at the right time and somebody finds you, somebody
Uh-huh.
reaches out and finds you. And I will tell you that, like, that was not my experience. My experience was that I reached out and I asked for what I wanted, and I took it and I worked really hard for it. And it is a less sexy way to get somewhere, like to get the kind of success you're looking for, but it did have that reparenting feeling of, oh, I did this all myself, and there is a satisfaction there.
Yeah. Well, I think too of like you birthed this vision. Like you had this vision of something you wanted to create, like your creative baby, and then making it happen. It's yeah.
And
I
I did it kicking and screaming, Jessica. Like, I tried to cancel the very first show, and the person at the artistic director at the pit was like, well, I really don't think you should do that. I really don't. And if you do, you're going to have to pay X number hundreds of dollars. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. I'll do it. But like, I think that's the best way to end up doing something that you're proud of, is to give yourself a deadline, schedule it first, and then you have to show up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we could talk for hours about like lessons that I've learned in business that have been, you know, experience. I don't even know where to start. Like losing so much money on stuff, but also feeling so profoundly fulfilled. Had a lot of those. Yeah, so much. And I'm thinking now, I mean, this is like one of the big themes of my life is this. I'm a Libra, so very much about balance and like two sides to everything. And I
Yeah.
feel a lot of the pull between like flow, ease, fun, how good being in that space feels for me. And then also like putting our tush in the chair and doing the hard work,
Yeah.
reaching out to people, doing the flyers, for me, the admin, which is like not my most favorite thing in the whole world. And it's almost always a both and, like you can't always be ponies and rainbows.
I know.
But also like I find as much as possible, if I can come from like juicy, playful space to sitting down in front of my computer, like I tend to do a little bit better. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I hear that. I hear that. It's hard once you find how good play feels. You're like, I don't want to do anything else. But if you don't do anything else, it feels kind of gluttonous. It feels like too much birthday. It is a balance. Yeah.
yeah. And like the pride that I feel when I'm able to actually honor these intentions for where I want to take something. Like
Yeah.
that feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, feels really good. Um, oh, I love it. What would you say? I want to come back to Rob Bell one more time, I think, because um, I'm actually, this will air after the retreat, but I'm going to be able to participate. He and Liz Gilbert are leading a one
Yes.
day, yeah, a 1 day retreat all about like using our imagination and creativity. And I'm so looking forward to that. But I'd love to hear in your relationship with him, like what's one gift that's come from your friendship with Rob?
I mean, so many, really. And he also, like, I got in touch with him because of the bitch seat, because I was going to do it in LA, and I reached out to him cold turkey, a
Yep.
total stranger,
Yep.
and asked if he wanted to be a guest on the show, and he said yes, which was crazy. And then what came from that was me realizing that all I have to do is ask, just
Yep.
ask.
Yep.
So that is huge, but also the fact that feeling like you are, the validation of feeling, of knowing with such certainty that you are kindred spirits with somebody, and having them affirm that that is the case. I mean, there is nothing more satisfying than that. It really, I mean, and I shouldn't need anybody outside of me to validate my existence, and I don't. But whenever I hear from him, or we have an email exchange or something, and he speaks to me as if I'm an equal,
Yeah. Yeah.
just a profound, like, check mark from the divine saying that I am exactly where I should be.
Yeah. Oh, I just felt that in my whole being. And the power of feeling so seen.
Yeah.
And it feeling, yeah, like so shared, feeling
Yeah.
so shared. I love that, Lyssa. I actually had a similar experience. I reached out to a very well-known astrologer. Her name
Yes.
is Bracha Goldsmith. Yeah. Also very interesting story of, Jewish roots and now doing stuff that's kind of like, very spiritually inclusive.
Yeah.
Um, with no expectations, just said like, I love your work. Here's a little bit about me. And we've developed this really beautiful friendship. Like it's
Love
just
it.
been, the magic of technology, like being able to communicate with someone across the world and sharing, getting to know each other and sharing parts of our lives. So yeah, I just want to give a blessing to those who are listening that, we're all struggling with our own stuff, and just because we feel like someone is, more well known or whatnot, like to be brave and to reach out and to know that, Ram Dass definitely says this: we're all just walking each other home, and we get to connect, and the power of these these relationships where we get to feel so seen and so affirmed. It's There's nothing like it. Yeah.
Yeah, and to know that there are many, many, many rejections and ignores as well. And that's
Sure.
also, I
Sure.
don't want to make it seem like my life is like, puppies and rainbows. Uh, Many, many, many people I reached out to said no or didn't respond. But that just makes the ones who do respond even more sparkly.
Yeah. Thank you. Well said. Yes. We've all landed on our asses many a time. And yeah, then the ones that are kindred spirits become really precious. It's so true. It's so true. Oh, thank you. This was such a treat. I want to give you a chance to share offerings that you have with our listeners, but also anything that you want to say before we bring this to a close.
Um, well, I guess a couple of things that I'm working on right now. I have a podcast called What's Betwixt Us that is on Apple and Spotify and Google, all the places you find podcasts, and it is a podcast about real life empathy at work, in the workplace, any industry. And so I just interview a variety of people from a variety of walks of life about their work and their personal stories and philosophies about empathy and why it's important, just as a way to sort of elevate those soft skills
Yeah.
in the workplace. And then the other thing I'm doing that's more in my private life is leading spontaneous writing prompt workshops, which I'm always accepting new people that are small groups that we meet in Zoom, and basically everybody gets a pre-selected, intuitively selected poem ahead of time or during the time, and you have 20 to 25 minutes to free write any medium you want using that poem as a prompt, and totally non-judgmental, as a celebration of creativity. And then everybody comes back together and reads what they've written with total support. And so yeah, these are two projects that are dear to me. What would I say right now? I mean, I feel like you've been a great, you've held space for me to say a lot of things that are really important to me
Covered a
today.
lot of really good ground. It's true.
But so yeah, I guess just, you know, stay with the uncertainty, sit with it, try to think of it as a gift. This is what I'm telling myself every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And maybe I'll just close with this blessing for us as we sit with the uncertainty, as we see it as a gift. May we also unfurl into the knowing that it's part of this sacred spiral of our lives, that even in these moments when we feel like we've been knocked sideways or feel really unsure, or discouraged, we're able to have the compassion to step back and to see this beautiful journey that we're on, that we're each on, the ways that we're able to approach the sticky spots from new angles, from upside down, from up above, and to infuse spirit into that, whether that's a sense of awe at scientific wonders, whether it's a sense of connection to past lives, whether it's a sense of kindred spirits alongside us on this path, whatever it is, that when we're able to stay with the uncertainty and infuse something deeper into it, the whole experience becomes a little bit softer. So yeah, may we bring a smile to this sacred spiral, and a blessing for all the ways we continually walk each other home.
Amen.
Amen. So grateful to be in conversation with you, Lyssa. What a friggin' treat. So good.
Made my week.
Made my week too. I've been so excited about this all week, just thinking about all my fun questions, and we got to most of them. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And folks, check out Lyssa's podcast and writing workshops. Are the writing workshops both for people who are newer to writing and who have been writing for a while?
Oh yeah, it's all levels.
Perfect. All levels. All right, everyone. May you have a beautiful day. May your day be infused with a sacred story or two, and we'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.